Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Understable Discourse, your go-to place for all the stats, analysis, and the occasional hot take in disc golf. Now, you have to forgive me if you can tell a little bit. I'm going through some allergies, so I may not be as boisterous or as loud this time, but we're going to have some fun doing it anyway. But thank you all for stopping by to watch this episode. Today, we're going to get into, the event this past weekend at the Northwest Disc Golf Championship, talk about some of the hot takes from the weekend and some of the, moments that are on everyone's minds, and then we're going to look ahead at the Ollie Open this upcoming weekend. Now, for the Northwest Disc Golf Championship, we definitely got ourselves a crazy weekend with heartbreaking and thrilling finishes, especially on the MPO side of things. As we talked about last week, this event was basically set up to combine the usual Beaver State Fling held at Milo McIver and the Portland Open held at both Glendoveer East and West. And so they mashed those two together, which, they could make an argument this is kind of our first look at a big preview to what the 2027 World Championships is going to be looking like, because this is the setup that we're going to get for that event with, rounds at Milo and rounds at Glendoveer East. I'm a little sad we don't get to see Glendoveer West, but that's my own personal opinion. However, other players' opinions, listening to a lot of them talk about the event itself, a large portion of them did mention that they wish these events still remain separate because they liked the fact that Milo would have its own event and Glendoveer would have its own event. However, a number of them still agreed that these two courses created a great test of a wide array of skills for this particular event, although we can all agree that the Northwest Disc Golf Championship probably could use a little bit more of a creative name than that, but we'll see what they come up with for future years. One of the reasons that we know that the course has provided a wide array of skill challenge is that the leaderboards throughout the weekend contain some players that we don't normally get to see, which in my opinion is a great thing when it comes to disc golf. On top of the new format, we were also able to see some incredible weather throughout the event, which was a nice departure from how the last month or so of the tour has felt, with a lot of events being very rainy, wet, and only having some days nice and some days being pretty challenging conditions to play through. But this was perfect for the courses to play in just the tip-top shape they could be in. When we look at Milo, for the FPO side, Milo proved to be a relatively challenging course with an average score of 1.51 strokes over par on day one. But the division saw significant improvement going into round two, where the field averaged even par for the round, which is pretty incredible. That's a big jump. And much of the round for the FPO field was kind of built around this stretch in the middle of holes 4 through 9, where that singular grouping alone averaged 2.21 strokes over par in the first round. So that grouping of holes was where a lot of the players kind of, would make or break their rounds at Milo McIver in that section. And those who came out clean, they found themselves clean at the end of the round with good scores. And a couple major highlights during that stretch, we look at both Rebecca Cox and Paige Pierce, who were able to get the eagle on hole 5 in rounds 1 and 2 respectively, which is pretty incredible in terms of like distance and everything there. When you think of both Rebecca Cox and Paige Pierce, I don't think you normally typically think they're on the same level from like a distance perspective. So really incredible to see both them do that, especially with Rebecca Cox, who doesn't have as much distance as Paige Pierce does, although she can throw pretty far, further than a lot of other people I could imagine. But also, additionally, humongous congratulations to Katrina Allen, who picked up her first ever tournament ace on hole 15 in round 2. If you haven't watched the video for it, go check it out. It's a really cool, endearing moment where she's just surprised by this ace that she can't see, and just it's heartwarming to see that kind of thing happen, and which is crazy to think about because she's a 2-time world champion before getting a tournament ace. Could you imagine? Like, yeah, I've won world championships twice, best player in the world 2 times for a while, arguably one of the 2 best in the sport at any given time. I've never had a tournament ace. But realistically, though, I think it's probably because that the other Allen, Jennifer Allen, is getting all of the Allen tournament aces for everybody else. So, but big congrats to Katrina Allen for that. Looking at the MPO field, Milo played harder than expected at only 0.69 strokes under par in round 1 and 1.87 strokes under par in round 2. So another big significant increase in the performance going into round 2 from round 1 at Milo. But the only truly notable holes are kind of the bookend holes of 2 and hole 18. Hole 2 was that near 1,200 foot par 5 where the most dominant playoff the tee was a roller. And from there, the players kind of needed to see what they had and manufacture forward progress for the next 2 shots into a pretty well protected green. And it proved to be the hardest hole at Milo for the MPO field. But when we look at hole 18, which was the other side of that coin, we got to see some really great scoring separation as players were forced to make decisions off of their drive and their third shots to play onto a very precarious island green. And so we saw scores ranging from 4 to 8 across the MPO field, making it so that you couldn't just take your hand off the wheel until well after finishing hole 18. So taking a birdie on hole 18 puts you in a very different class than the rest of the players in the MPO division. As we look at the overall play for the field, I can't say that I'm very surprised to see Missy Gannon having led the field during the first 2 rounds for the FPO field. While Milo does have its fair share of distance requirements, having consistency I think is far more important on that particular course, especially with them getting rid of hole 15, which used to be a pretty big distance hole, and separating it into 2 smaller holes. I think Missy just has been nothing if not very consistent as of late. And so coming out of round 2, she found herself in the lead, 1 stroke ahead of Holland Handley, and a handful of strokes ahead of both Lisa Fakis and Paige Pierce. And as I said in the show last week, if Paige could just stay in the conversation going into Glendoveer, she would be an immediate threat to take a win going over to the second half of this event. But over on the MPO side, Milo McIver created some very interesting storylines, chiefest of which was probably that Paul Ulibarri shooting the hot round in round 1 with an 11 under par, bogey-free performance. And we also saw names like Bradley Williams, Corey Ellis, Mason Ford, and Dustin Keegan in the fray several strokes back. But after a day of figuring out the course and getting into the rhythm of things, we saw the typical Paul McBeth Gannon Bird decided to wake up and absolutely bring the heat with a couple of 12 under par rounds in round 2. So coming out of Milo, we had Gannon in the lead, Paul a couple strokes back, and Calvin and Ricky right on their heels. Looking at Glendoveer East, it definitely brought a very different type of golf as the more comfortable distance throwers started to see their day in the sun. And over on the FPO side, in round 3, Glendoveer averaged 1.08 strokes over par, and it was pretty clear that the bottom of the field was holding the top back because after the cut, the course average improved almost 3 strokes to be 1.7 strokes under par. Probably the lower half of the FPO field struggling a bit with that distance and the restrictive OB they put in this year. But this can even be seen on hole 18, where it averaged 0.61 strokes over par in round 3 and it averaged under par in round 4. For the men, though, Glendoveer averaged about half a stroke over par in round 3, playing pretty difficult for them, and then jumping to 2.76 strokes under par in round 4 after the cut, likely for the same reasons. Getting a chance to open up and sort of prepare the cannons proved to be very, very helpful for players like Holland Handley and Paige Pierce, who both shot great 10 under par rounds to put themselves in first and second respectively going into the final round, where Holland already had a 4-stroke lead and just had to keep it clean. And she did a bit more than that, shooting a field-leading 8 under par to take her 3rd win of the year by a margin of 7 strokes. And for me, this calls into question that age-old debate of whether or not her 3 wins, 2 in a Kristenless field, or Kristen's 3 wins, despite not playing very much, is better. So what's your opinion on this? I mean, if you look at Holland's season, she's got 8 events with no finishes outside the top 5 and 3 wins. And only 2 of those are 5th place, so the rest are all on the podium, whereas Kristen has played less events at only 5, one of them being at a slightly weaker field at Konopiste, and she has 3 wins and no finishes worse than second. So let me know in the comments what you think technically is the better performance so far this season. If you were playing in the FPO division, which of those 2 seasons would you want to have so far? 8 events, 3 wins, 5 events, 3 wins. For me, I think it's still going to be Kristen's argument to win because she does lead the head-to-head matchups. However, as the season goes on and the field stays split with the European events, we may have to have some really interesting conversations about who really is the top of the FPO field, because if Kristen continues to play less events than Holland like this, and Holland keeps getting wins, you could make the argument that these events where Evelina and Henna are not playing on the European side, Kristen, even though Silva Saarinen is an incredible talent and Annika Sten is an incredible talent, Kristen is playing against a less powerful field than the American field with people like Holland Handley, Missy Gannon, Kat Murch, Ella Hansen. The list goes on a bit deeper than the European pool. Now, hopping over to the MPO race, there was one very clear horse out ahead in round 3, and that was Anthony Barella, who decided to go 10 under in the first 11 holes and finish at 12 under overall, jumping him up to a tie with Gannon at the top of the field. And that put them in a position where they both had a 5-stroke lead over Corey Ellis and Kyle Klein. And there were a few others looking to get into the contention at 6 strokes back, like Isaac Robinson, Luke Taylor, Paul Ulibarri, and Ricky Wysocki. You may notice that one name not on that list was Paul McBeth, who shot, honestly, maybe one of the most painful rounds I've ever seen Paul shoot in his career. He finished the last 2 rounds at Glendoveer 1 over par between both rounds. I think this is going to be an event where, he is going to be probably going back to the drawing board. I just saw earlier that he said he's not going to be playing the preserve, maybe taking a little bit of time to work on his game and get himself ready to go, because we know Paul typically likes to peak around the majors, and we got 2 majors around the corner, so sounds like he's going to take some time for himself to work on what he's got going so far. The final round for the MPO was an absolute whirlwind, where we watched AB and Gannon duke it out in a fist fight of birdies. Gannon came out hot, gaining 2 very quick strokes on Anthony Barella, only to give 4 strokes back to him on holes 3 and 5. And Gannon wouldn't hit his stride again until hole 10, where he rattled off 4 straight birdies to make it relatively close. And down the stretch, there was a very crucial moment on hole 17 where Gannon was able to get the birdie, and AB wasn't able to convert on a very difficult straddle putt from behind a tree, and that put Gannon only down by 1 stroke leading into hole 18. And meanwhile, while the two of them were fighting it out, Kyle Klein going on this sneaky run, 7 for 8 on holes 8 through 15, and this would bring him within 2 strokes of AB and 1 stroke of Gannon to go into hole 18. Now, to paint a quick picture for you of hole 18 at Glendoveer East, we have been given some insane shenanigans over the years. If you look at down the list, it doesn't play the most difficult. It has relatively decent scoring separation, but there's something about the final lead card on hole 18 at this particular course. In 2022, we saw Garrett Gerthy and Simon Lizotte doing battle on hole 18, where they would both take turns throwing some pretty poor shots, leading to a bogey for Garrett Gerthy that would end up costing him the win. And then in 2023, Aaron Gossage had a 1-stroke lead on Adam Hammis going into 18, where he proceeded to throw away that stroke over the course of an ugly par. Hole 18 at Glendoveer, although not playing the hardest, like I said, just has a way of making itself relevant at the right time, and this weekend was no different, because we started off with Gannon throwing a wide hyzer shot. Some thought it was a little bit too wide, leaving him in an almost ideal position on the left side of the fairway, and from there he was going to be able to either push for eagle or likely have a relatively easy birdie with just a few good shots left for him. And then AB steps up and throws an absolute worm burner that I don't know how still manages to go like 400 feet and just clear the OB despite being about 3 feet off the ground. I swear, if anyone was standing in front of that disc, it would have literally went right through their legs. It was moving so fast. But then Kyle steps up and throws a really solid shot, putting him in scoring position as well. Now we cut to AB, who's lining up this shot way further right on the fairway than he wants to, and he kind of pulls his forehand a bit too much right into a tree that kicks him hard to the right and almost goes out of bounds. And then Klein steps up and puts his second shot to about 40 feet for the eagle, and that puts a lot of pressure on both Gannon and AB, because who knows what's going to happen at this point. Kyle might get himself an eagle, and so Gannon lines up his aggressive second shot, only to just rifle it into the trees that are right in the middle of the fairway, dropping him well short of any kind of play at the basket, with the eagle not available to him anymore. So we cut back over to AB, and he bails himself out, gets to the left of the fairway where he can now attack the green. So at this point, the tension is incredibly palpable, and a lot of people feel like a possible 3-way tie might be forming, or at the very least expecting that 2 of these players may end this hole in a 2-way tie, and we're going to get some extra holes of disc golf, which we all know we all love. So now we cut to AB throwing his 4th shot, and he leaves it about 16 feet short of the basket for an uphill look at the par. And now all Gannon has to do is birdie the hole to send it into a playoff, barring AB hits his par putt, and who knows what happens with Kyle with his eagle putt. And so that's when we get the second most talked about moment probably of the weekend, where Gannon proceeds to step up, measure the wind, range find the shot. He's got 3 discs in his hand. He puts 2 down, picks up one, which he said was a tactic, and he wasn't sure about throwing a backhand because it didn't come out clean on the previous shot. And then he puts that disc down, picks up another disc, his M5, MD5, and throws that on a forehand and just pins it under the basket. But it takes him nearly over a minute. I think it's like 1:07 to throw that shot. So there's a lot of controversy around how long he took, and no violations were called by other players or tournament staff. And so Kyle steps up and he misses his eagle putt, going just a bit short right. So it's time for AB to convert. This is his moment. He converts this, we send it to a playoff, and here we go. However, hole 18 at Glendoveer East strikes again, and what we witnessed was a shorted putt thrown to the low right side chains that did not stick and fell out of the basket. The competitors, the crowd, the commentators, everyone was pretty much unanimously speechless, maybe except for Ian behind the mic, at that moment. And we saw raw emotion from AB as hole 18 took another victim, allowing Gannon to pick up his second win of the season. Listen, there is a lot of chatter about if the putt was missed or if it was a spit out, blaming the basket, yada yada. We always tend to do this, where if it stays, it's a great putt. If it misses, it's the basket's fault. And here's the thing, these guys are the top players in the world, and at that point, you need to be able to recognize the angle that you're putting at uphill, and you need to put that thing more to the center of the basket. And even if the basket spit it out, AB put it in a position where that was more likely. And you have to still look at the fact that AB threw 4 shots on hole 18 to put himself at that spot. Regardless of whether it was a spit out or not, AB played himself into that position. Would I have loved to see him take the win? Yeah, that'd have been great, but he unfortunately put himself there, and that's how it goes sometimes. Also, did Gannon take too long? Yeah. Should he have been called? Technically, yes. But that's not where we're at in the sport right now. Players are not calling each other in crucial moments like that. Gannon outright said twice he will not call anyone out of fear of retaliation from other players. And until we find a way to address the real problem, adding more rules will not solve that problem. You know, one of the things we've been talking about recently, and you've probably heard it all over the disc golf sphere if you've been listening to any podcasts, is you've got the proposed rule changes and things like time extensions and all this stuff, and addressing your lie and getting 45 seconds from the field. And one of the things that I'm going to say about this is that I think that there is a disease in disc golf called pace of play. And the PDGA is choosing to try to run around and put Band-Aids on all the little scratches, and they're trying to treat the symptoms of this disease without really going after the source of that disease and trying to fix it. We don't have, like, putting another rule in place like time extensions or the other stuff creates a position where players have to do a significant amount more to track what's going on. Now, I've heard people argue that that's not really the case. They always have their phones out anyway. But, like, do we want players having to sit there and time everything? But even if that's the case, the problem is when you put a rule into place like this, you have to be able to delineate all of the different outcomes, the enforcement, how it's going to be handled, every single little detail and facet. And I'm sure if it gets passed, hopefully they'll do that kind of thing. But my opinion is, take it for what it's worth, I'm not on the Pro Tour. I'm a fan. I play disc golf in tournaments a lot. But I think that this idea that you have to be a certain person or be on the tour to have an opinion is a little crazy. I work in business. I work in operations specifically, so it's my job to think critically about the short term and the long term and how to use the resources I have at my disposal to make the best possible changes that give us the best possible outcome. And one of the things that the PDGA has to look at is the resources that they have available to them. They only have a few marshals on site at any given event. Now, when it's a Pro Tour event, it's not a major, they only have a few people who are able to go around and do anything. So why are we trying to create a whole bunch more rules? Or why are we trying to argue that every card should have a marshal? There are no resources available to make either of those different outcomes viable. What we should be doing is we should be training the few who we have to be able to look at the live scoring, see the pace of play issues that are happening with cards in the field. When you see a card gets behind by 3 holes, that marshal or official, whoever it may be, tournament staff, should be going out to that hole with a golf cart or whatever they have available to them. They should be then assessing what the problem is. Is it a player? If so, you warn the player and then you begin penalizing that player if that play continues. Is it the card's fault? You warn the card and you penalize the card if that problem continues, and you get them back on pace. And I think if we put this thing in position for a couple of years, we enforce it really well, we train only 3 or 4 or 5 really good staff members to be able to do this at an event. Give this a couple years, and I think you're going to see some really positive improvement on the overall pace of play without having to put too much of this in the players' hands, who have admittedly said they're not going to call it anyway. So that's my 2 cents. It's insane to me that decisions are being made without any kind of forethought to what the larger picture is. More rules is not always the answer. Back on a positive note, though, how about us? We called the top 3 in FPO, albeit Missy and Paige in a different order, and the top 2 in MPO in the right order. So that's a pretty solid set of predictions, if I do say so myself. What weren't very solid predictions, unfortunately, were my hold my bag picks for the week, where I came in 2,558th out of 4,675th, which still is pretty good. I had solid picks with Eagle McMahon and obviously Gannon Burr, but my picks of Sullivan and Paul Macbeth really didn't get the job done. Before I move on, a few other quick hitters that I think we have to mention is, number 1, we got Taylor Chosick coming in 7th place, which was her best finish on tour ever in her career, which is a huge win for her. Jennifer Allen popped off, coming in 4th for the event, only a couple strokes off of 2nd place. The Jomez commentary team of Nate Sexton in 10th place and Paul Ulibarri taking 14th was fantastic to watch. And also Luke Taylor demonstrating an incredible play at Glendoveer over the last 2 rounds to climb into 7th place, which is his best finish of the entire year. Now, looking at ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have our second stop of the DGPT Euro Tour in Knoll, Sweden. The Ali Open returns this year as a full-fledged Elite Series event after a very successful debut as a silver event in 2024. And the course at the Ali Disc Golf Center looks like, a world-class venue with a combination of open holes, wooded holes, distance shots, and touch shots. And one thing that seems very obvious is the course plays with elevation a lot, forcing players to really have to know their disc and maintain endurance throughout the event. There is a really talented field throwing it down on the MPO side with U.S. players like Ricky Wysocki, Ezra Aderhold, Matt Bell, Raven Newsom, Kevin Jones, and James Conrad in attendance, along with a few others. But not to be scared by their attendance. We got European standouts like Niklas Antala, Mari Vilman, Vaino Makala, Eetu Tuominen, Jesse Nieminen, and Una Heinonen are ready to take a stand here. And for me, I actually want to see Mauri go back-to-back with his big win at Konopiste. And I think Ricky's going to come in 2nd, and Niklas Antala is going to take the 3rd position. So it should be pretty good on the MPO side. Looking at the FPO side, we once again have kind of a weekend European field with no Evelina and no Henna present. So I'm kind of expecting Kristen to take the win. I think Silva's going to put forth a great effort for 2nd place. And I think 3rd place is going to go to whoever plays better between Annika Sten and Rachel Turdan, and I think Sten takes it for this one for 3rd place. But that's all I have for you for today. Thank you so much for watching and putting up with an allergy-filled version of myself and a day late on the video. By the way, never, ever get raccoons in your basement. It's devastating and takes a lot of time and energy. But please make sure to like, subscribe. Those are things that really help out the channel and our growth. And make sure to go check out our daily content on the Understable Discourse Instagram page, where we post every single day about reactions of things going on for the events every week. And we're always looking to grow more and do some more interesting things. There's some big plans coming down the pipeline for the remainder of the year. We're going to be trying to maybe get a pro or two to come on the show for 10-15 minutes to talk about their season. So it's some fun things are coming up. But thank you so much again for being here, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Let me know in the comments where you're playing disc golf this weekend, or you're just going to be watching disc golf, or maybe you're taking a weekend off and just enjoying some relaxation. Either way, I hope it's everything you need it to be. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.